Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Eco Talks, your weekly dive into all the things related to climate, energy, and environmental policy. I'm Hitesh, and today my friend Jack is going to join me for the podcast. Let's get going.
Hey Hitish, great to be here today. Yeah, today's topic is quite an interesting one. Today we're going to be discussing the new president, Donald Trump, and how his policies are going, the effect that his policies could have on the Green New Deal.
Hey, Jack. It's going to be interesting, I'm sure about it. So let's quickly revisit about the topic. What is the new Green Deal all about? I'm pretty interested. Hey Jack, great to have you here on the podcast. And thanks for the small insights that you gave about the topic. Let's revisit it quickly. What is the Green Deal all about? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so as I'm sure many of our viewers are aware, the Green New Deal is designed to treat climate change like the potential emergency that it is. So a lot of people think that climate change is something that's been ignored for far too long. So the Green New Deal is going to try to remove us as a society from fossil fuels and move us more in the direction of green energy through the creation of green jobs and making renewable resources, such as, for example, wind or solar power, easier to come by.
Whoa. That's some crazy insights, man. Exactly, it's ambitious, but Trump's stance on climate and energy is well the complete opposite. Let's talk more about it.
Yeah, he's had a couple policies that he's suggested that don't exactly seem like they're going to make a lot of people who are interested in the environment and think of the Green Deal as the new way forward happy. For example, one of the recent things that he's sort of come up with is wind farms. So, he's sort of that we've in the United States we've been making a move towards wind energy as a potential energy source that we could go to in the future. And he's sort of moved away from that in a couple important ways, one of which is requiring permits now for people to use wind energy, which I personally think will have quite the which it'll make it not as accessible as it once was.
Well, that's some crazy insights, Jack. But also remember, under his administration, the US also pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords. That not only showed progress here at home, but also gave countries like China or India more room to delay their own climate responsibilities, or worse, an excuse to walk away too. So that's how it's going on.
Yeah, definitely. He's also increased he's signed a couple contracts recently to increase the contracts for liquid natural gas. This is something that we as a society have been trying to move away from slowly but surely, but these new deals will lock us in for decades. So also something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you need to remember about the executive orders. There were a few. One opened up huge areas for ocean for oil and gas drilling. Another one allowed oil companies access to previously protected wilderness in Alaska. And get this, he even rolled back the Endangered Species Act as a barrier to oil development, which is quite funny.
Yeah, the Alaska issue is definitely something to keep an eye on because it'll have a number of effects. It's some people think it'll disrupt migration patterns. Others think it'll damage biodiversity. So definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Absolutely. So the question is, what's the real threat if Trump wins again, which he already did? That is all about. It's actually about systematic long term setbacks, reversals that could derail global climate efforts for decades. So that's how we see.
Yeah, well, you touched upon it earlier when you brought up the possibility of India and China, two other big producers of to the other two major producers of that the major contributors to climate change potentially changing their course. The U.S. is often looked to as a leader for this type of stuff, and by leaving the Paris Accords, they essentially say we don't want this responsibility anymore, and this can be a problem not just for the economy but for the environment.
Yeah, exactly. You are absolutely right about it. In short, if we talk about the Green Deal, It envisions a cleaner, fairer, and more sustainable future. That's what Trump's approach looks like. It locks us into the past with oil rigs, gas pipelines, and rising emissions.
No, absolutely. I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think the youth know this. You've probably heard this before, but there's only one planet. We don't get another one. There's been talk of terraforming, all this type of stuff, but we should work to make the Earth more livable. And these policies are pretty much doing the opposite of that. So it's good to stay involved and stay in the know, whether you're a voter, activist, or just somebody who cares about this issue.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's all for the today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and goodbye. Climate conversation do matter, especially now. It's the time to talk about it. Over to you, Jack. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, it's been good to talk with you today. I always like coming on and doing this podcast. It's always good for us to be able to discuss this type of stuff, and this is something that I think needs to be talked about, and I hope that our listeners have a more clear understanding of what's going on now. And yeah, that's basically about it. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed. See you guys again soon.
So, next week we are going to talk about the Greenland deal and the landscape around it and what are the barriers to it. So, let's get going.
Yeah, absolutely. So to the listeners, I'll be back again next week. Donald Trump has no shortage of policies that we can potentially talk about. So we're going to focus mostly on Greenland next week, but we are also going to bring it back to the climate aspect as well. So we're going to do a little bit of that and talk about how the climate itself, what role that plays in the desire of the Americans to take Greenland. So make sure you join us again next week because it should be an interesting topic. And this is us signing off.